Hey managers of the Super Conference, this is your Commissioner Tyler Burkhart here with a special edition, the Mid-Season Awards Recap and Review. Now other than the draft and the pre-rankings, this is my favorite time of fantasy football season because this is where we take a time out and look back and what's happened so far and make some predictions as far as who makes the playoffs and who may be on top when the season comes to an end. So let's take a few moments here and kind of reflect, and you can sit back and watch my predictions, and I'd love to know if you agree or disagree with them, and make sure to respond to your own predictions in the forum on the website. Okay, so division winners, I think two are pretty easy looking at their teams and the matchups. I think Seattle winning the AFC West and Green Bay winning the NFC East are pretty clear in my mind. Seattle I think has the better team in that break or in that conference. I think his 2-1 conference record over San Diego's 1-2 right now is pretty critical, giving him a little leg on the competition. And meanwhile, Green Bay is tied with Indy, and they play each other this week, which I can't wait to watch that matchup. But with Indy having Ray Rice and AJ Green out, I think more than likely Green Bay will win that game, and I think that'll be pretty much the game that determines who wins that division. So therefore, I think those are the easy ones. The more difficult ones, let's start with the AFC East. It's interesting because right now New York Yankees has the best record in the division. Also is 3-0 in the division. But meanwhile, I think on paper I have the better team. And even Cleveland, I think, has a better team than New York Yankees. And I think total points will back or support that argument. So the interesting thing is, because of that 3-0 division record, it's almost like Cleveland and I are a game and a half back of New York Yankees. So it's going to be really interesting to see what all happens. I think I still pull it out just because I have the better team. But I think it's going to be really close, and it'll come down to the final week. Meanwhile, for the NFC West, I'm going to go with San Antonio Toros and Tim Copeland. This is a tough one because it's so competitive. A lot of the teams are so even that it's really hard to pick a winner. I think the difference, though, I think it will come down to San Antonio and Portland still. But once again, that divisional tiebreaker is so crucial. And right now, Portland is 0-3 in their division. So I think ultimately that will be the tiebreaker, giving San Diego the edge. The two wildcard teams that I think will get in are Indianapolis and San Diego for completely different reasons. Indianapolis, I think, gets in because of their strong start. If you were to ask me, do I think Indianapolis is a top 6 team right now, I would tell you no. I don't think they are. Especially with Jimmy Graham's injury, high ankle sprain, I don't think he's going to come back from that. I think that's really the difference between him being an elite team and not. And, looking at the future matchups, though, I think he's going to still get at least 2 wins as he plays Cleveland, who has 4 players on bye that week, and then Minnesota. So that should get him to 7 wins because he already has 5. So I wouldn't be surprised if Indianapolis just goes 7-6, or maybe 8-5 if they can get one more victory. But I think that should be enough to put them in, especially if they go 8-5. Meanwhile, San Diego, I think, is still a well-rounded team. I don't see any scenario where they're excluded from the playoffs, so I'm going to still put them in, especially because they have some good matchups on the schedule. So those are the 6 teams I think that make the playoffs. Who's the most deserving that wouldn't be in that scenario? And I would go with the Los Angeles Quakes, which is my brother Nate Burkhart. Nate worked so hard this year with the draft picks, moving up in the draft from last year's pitiful team. And I think he did a great job choreographing a team for this year, especially the pick with Victor Cruz. It's just that, this year the matchups didn't work out for him, and he hasn't been consistent. That's the other thing. He has too many weeks where he's put up only 70 and 80 points. So that's one of the reasons why he has a 3-4 record. But still, I think he's done a great job managing this year, so that's why I give him that award. So, okay, Mid-Manager of the Year awards. Which two do I, think have done the best job? The first one, I definitely have to go with Adam Wirtz for Green Bay Legends. Drafting Percy Harvin and Rashard Mendenhall, I think is going to pay off in the end. Mendenhall could be a keeper if, once again, he can get healthy and show that he was the Mendenhall of 2 years ago. Also moved up in the draft to get DeMarco Murray, which I thought was a smart move. And with Breeze, I mean, that's just an overall really good team. Meanwhile, the second person I want to give it to is Tim Copeland of San Antonio Toros. Tim really made the good move. I talked to Tim as far as improving his running back depth. I don't regret it yet just because I think Ryan Matthews will have a good second half of the year. But getting McGahee and Alfred Morris for him was huge because now he's got that nice little 3 running back system, and they all are centered around RG3. That's a good combination. Should get him in the playoffs, and that's why I think Tim deserves that honor. For disappointing managers, now, just for the record, I think we're all great managers. I just think some have done better than others, and I have my own philosophies which are different than others. So this is not, a fact. It's just an opinion, and you're right to disagree with me, but that's fine. The first one I want to give it to is Minnesota Bryans. I think, it's pretty clear. You don't give up on a year. Injuries are so unpredictable that you never know when some of your bench players will come up and be a starter. So in reality, especially after a 2-1 start, giving up on the year is pretty inexcusable in our league. But in Brian's counter-argument, he did get some good draft picks for next year. I just wouldn't give up that early. The second disappointing manager, I think, is Josh Miller of San Fran Frenzy. Now, I think Josh is a really good manager. Actually, for the pre-rankings, I gave Josh a 5 out of 5 on the ranking for management skills or scale. I think that's why his team was higher than it really was. But the one thing that I'm just really surprised about is everybody made moves to become better in his division except him. I mean, we talked about the San Antonio trade. Obviously, Portland pulled off that huge blockbuster deal. And then finally, Oakland Balos reached out and got Kelvin Johnson. So everyone got better, but San Fran didn't do anything. He didn't make one trade. He signed on the players who are injury prone to begin with. And as a result, that's why he has the 3-4 record. Now, I still think he's got a shot, but it's not looking as promising as it did after that 2-1 start. So we'll see if he makes a move. If not, he may be selling earlier than he hoped on his season. All right, so who's the dark horse for the year? I'm going to be kind of obvious for this one. I think it's Portland Car Ramrod. They're 3-4, but on paper they're still an awesome team despite the MJD injury. I think it's still a team to watch. If it comes down to the total points tiebreaker and they pull off a 7-6 record, I think they're going to get that tiebreaker. So I think they're really the dark horse, and it's not a team I'd want to face in the playoffs either. All right, so my Skip Bayless prediction. I think it is a real likelihood that we could see 2 teams from the AFC East make the playoffs. I think we'd all agree, even myself, I'm in the league, and I'm not afraid to admit it, that the AFC East has been the worst division so far. But stay with me on this. The reason why I think they could send 2 teams is right now New York Yankees at 4-3. If they can beat Kiln and Minnesota Bryans, which they should, they're favored, that means they have 4 games to pull out 1 more victory. I would like to think that they could do that. That would give them a 7-6 record. To even improve their odds, if that one other victory is against Cleveland in their division, they would have a 5-1 division in the AFC East, more than likely giving them the tiebreaker. Actually guaranteeing them the tiebreaker. The only way we could beat that, Cleveland and I, is finishing 8-5 or better. So therefore, if that does happen, New York Yankees would take the AFC East. Now, here's where things could get really interesting. I think the likelihood of Cleveland finishing 7-6 is not that great. But if I can finish 7-6, which right now actually Yahoo projects me to finish 8-5. But let's just say for the sake of conversation, I finish 7-6. Normally, that 6th spot is a tiebreaker. Where a 7-6 team gets it because of total points. That's happened for our first 2 years. More than likely, that last wild card will go to another 7-6 team. Therefore, I think there's a great likelihood that myself, Indianapolis Eyeball, Fargo and Bargo, Oakland Velos, I think I got them all. All those 4 teams finished 7-6. I think Portland Car Ramrod right now finishes 6-7, just out of the playoffs. I think San Diego Whales finishes 8-5 to get that first wild card spot, and the LA Quakes in Cleveland finishing 6-7, just out of the hunt. So here's the catch then. Taking those 4 teams right now, if you look at the Yahoo projections as well as total points as of today, I have more total points than all those other teams. That would give me the tiebreaker and give me the final wild card spot. So there's a scenario laid out for you where both the Yankees and myself can still get in the playoffs. I know that sounds crazy, but I think it's there's a good chance of it happening. All right. So what do I think will happen at the end? Who will win it all? So taking the 6 teams that I think will get into the playoffs, I think Seattle and Green Bay will get the byes. I think I myself would beat Indianapolis, and I think San Antonio would lose to San Diego. So this is where I think it would get really interesting, where Seattle would take on San Diego, the rivalry of the year, in the semifinals, versus Green Bay and myself in the other semifinals. I'll take both of the top seeds there. I think Seattle and Green Bay are the better 2. So I think that is my projected championship, Seattle versus Green Bay. And as my grand champion, I will predict Seattle Sasquatches, Kyle Armstrong, winning this year. Here's my logic. The whole year we've been talking about this magical trio between Rogers, McCoy, and Gronkowski. And it's a great trio. But throughout the year, he has pieced and put in different players as a puzzle. And now looking at the puzzle, it looks complete. LeSure looks like not a great, but a solid running back for the rest of the season. Meanwhile, he's got wide receivers like Jeremy Maclin, once Danny Amendola comes back from injury, Sidney Rice, where he can put into the wide receiver and utility position, and he can be okay. With that team and the capability of putting 20-plus points from his trio, I think there's a real likelihood that he can win this year. I think he's done a great job, and that's why I will predict at this time that Seattle will be crowned the Super Conference champion for year 3. So that's my mid-season recap. Make sure to go on the forum and do yours. Love to hear your thoughts. I'm your Commissioner, Tyler Burkhart. Game on.